Hello and welcome to the Lend Hoping Nothing podcast. I'm Michael Humphreys and I'm happy to be talking to you today. This is episode 19 and today we're going to be talking about St. Alphonsus Liguori on Usury. So if you're watching this on Substack, you might notice that I am not in my office anymore. And that was because of some flooding that happened down in my office, so I had to move all of my stuff into another room while that's all getting repaired, which is part of the reason I haven't posted a podcast in a while. In addition, as part of the Dom Uni PhD program, there are certain research credits that I have to validate, and so part of that is potentially giving a webinar or online lecture, and so I had some questions about that and of whether something like this would count towards that, because I have to validate I think 60 credits a year for 3 years, and so if I could do a 1 hour podcast as a lecture to the general public, that would be something that would help me meet those requirements. However, as I've found out, apparently the school is almost entirely shut down over the summer, and everyone's kind of on holiday. So I'm just going to try to do this in any case. So probably a lot of future episodes are going to be related to some of the stuff that I've been reading and researching. Some of the interesting things I've been reading are Liguori, which I'm going to talk about today, but also reading Cajetan's commentary on the Summa, which has been interesting as well. I've also been reading his De Cambiis, which is on monetary exchanges. And also, I've been looking into his work on the Montes Pietatis, which is an important work, I think, for understanding the documents coming out of, or really the document on Usury and the Montes Pietatis, coming out of the Fourth Lateran Council. So yeah, and then also Giles of Lesines. So because he wrote the De Usurius in Communi, which used to be attributed to St. Thomas Aquinas. And that has had some very interesting insights with respect to usury and the census contract and things that I haven't really read in other authors who've actually cited this work, mostly because I think of the framework in which they approach it. So like John Noonan and Odd Langholm, I think, have both cited it, but there are some very interesting insights in there with respect to property rights and things that I think are not really discussed. I've seen in at least those two authors. So yeah, we'll be discussing some of that, and hopefully, I can get some of this to count towards some of those credits. But otherwise, we'll see. In addition to that, I also kind of want to still dig into, Catholic social teaching and discuss that. And also, there's the 2018 document from the former CDF on the economy, which has some interesting insights as well that I think need to be discussed, because they do explicitly invoke their competence as in moral theology in making that statement. So it's reasonably high level of authority with respect to what they're saying. So that all aside, let's kind of just jump into Liguori. And so the let me get it. I'm using a translation that I found on the Novus Ordo Watch website. If you don't know who the Novus Ordo Watch is, they're a Sedevacantist group, just as far as I'm aware, they're deny Vatican II and so forth. That's all I know or really care to know about them. I'm not a schismatic, and I don't really care much about what schismatics think. So, but they had on their website, they have a English translation, and I just copied it and printed it out. I'm not entirely sure who actually translated it. At least I didn't print out that part. There seems to be, as far as the translation goes, it's okay as far as it goes. But there are some typos. Maybe I just copied it wrong, but there do seem to be a few typos in here. Also, there's some very strange translations, and the translator, claims certain words literally mean this, and I don't know. I don't know what the translator thinks literally means, but for example, damum emergens does not literally mean financial loss. It means emerging loss. And then I think elsewhere where Liguori is talking about the Montes Pietatis, the translator, here it is, says this is literally a towering money heap of compassion. That's not what Montes Pietatis means. It means mounts of piety. Maybe you can translate piety as compassion, but there's some weird stuff in there like that, and he translates those terms in that way as well. So it can be kind of confusing. There's a couple of citations from Aquinas that are quite strange given the way that the translator decided to translate it, and it doesn't really line up with the way that the usual kind of English translations of Aquinas. So I don't think the meaning is significantly different, but it's a little bit awkward to read, I think. So in any case, let's go ahead and jump right into this. Oh, before I kind of jump into it, one of the things is that I'm fairly critical of Liguori on Usury, and I do think he gets a lot of things wrong. But the value of Liguori is that he does represent sort of this culmination of the scholastic tradition, because he's citing authors throughout the scholastic tradition and their insights on Usury. So De Lugo, Molina, De Soto, Cajetan, Navarius, who is that other one? I can't remember. De Medina. Isn't De Medina Navarius? I think that's the same person. In any case, so he does cite all of these people. I'm not entirely sure about Cajetan, because I've been reading Cajetan, and I just he cites him in favor of Lucrum Caesans or Prophet Ceasing, and I don't think that's the position Liguori claims he takes, I don't think is actually the position he takes. So that's part of the importance of him, but also because St. Alphonsus is a doctor of the church, he does carry some heavy weight. Now, I am critical of Liguori, and he is a doctor of the church. He's the doctor of moral theology. But in this particular case, I find him problematic, not only because I don't think his arguments work, but also because there's a lot of inconsistencies in what he claims. And I've been reading some other works, so there's a couple of books I've been reading on material and formal cooperation, which Liguori either introduces or develops. Rethinking Cooperation with Evil, a virtue-based approach by Ryan Connors, and then Cooperation with Evil, Thomistic Tools of Analysis by Kevin Flannery. And both of those works are critical of the position that Liguori takes, because there's various issues in the way that he defines it and applies it, and then also there seems to be inconsistencies in the way that Liguori uses it. And one of the big ones with respect to usury is that Aquinas discusses the case. He says, well, is it licit to borrow at usury? And so from the kind of perspective of formal material cooperation, okay, you can't formally intend the usury because that's evil, but also you can't materially, proximately, and immediately cooperate in that evil. But the one who borrows at usury is the proximate and immediate cause of the usurious dealing. He's right in there cooperating with it because he's the one who's accepting the contract. And so it seems from that sort of typical material formal cooperation that would place Liguori against Aquinas. And the way that Ryan Connors kind of explains this is that Aquinas is thinking about the per se effects of the act. So the borrower is borrowing. There's nothing in itself which is in the nature of borrowing that entails usury. And so you can intend usury, you can will that without willing the usuries. And so because the usury is not a per se effect of borrowing, there's a sense in which it is licit. Now, Aquinas also adds on top of that there's no kind of scandal involved, that when you're borrowing from the usurer, the seeking of usury is not occasioned by your borrowing, but it comes from the malice of the usurer's heart or desire or will. So it's firmly grounded that the usurer is the one who is seeking the usury, and he would seek it regardless. So it's a different analysis from sort of the typical material formal cooperation, and it is put in the context of what I think is a broader moral theology, which is what Ryan Connors seems to be arguing as well. That it's not, cooperation isn't this other thing. It's part of this, total understanding of acts and virtue and so forth. So there's that kind of criticism of Liguori, and then also I've been reading some Elizabeth Anscombe where she talks about what was it? Invincible ignorance and sin, and how ignorance plays in with sin. And she criticizes Liguori, who seems to be inconsistent there as well. Whereas I have to kind of read it a little bit closer, but Liguori kind of says, where there is no knowledge, there is no liberty. Where there is no liberty, there is involuntariness and consequently no sin. And he seems to apply that sort of dictum or axiom kind of inconsistently. And it doesn't seem consistent with what Aquinas says. I think in the De Malo question 3, I think is what she cited. That's something I got to think a little bit more about. But you have some authors who are criticizing Liguori, and these things really cut to significant aspects of moral theology. So we're talking about cooperation in evil, which is a very big, important topic in our own day. And then Anscombe, how does ignorance and knowledge play into whether an act is sinful or not, which is also really cuts to voluntariness and intention and so forth. So so I feel more comfortable knowing that those type of criticisms are coming from other serious authors or serious scholars, that to kind of criticize some of the similar kind of inconsistencies I see in Liguori here. So that kind of giving some context into why I feel okay with criticizing a doctor of the church. So let's kind of just, with that out of the way, let's kind of hop into the actual document, or the actual question, I guess. So he opens up with the very typical kind of doctrine of usury, and to kind of give an overview, so I want to hit on just a few points. So we're going to talk about what he says about usury generally, and then a couple of the extrinsic titles that he talks about, which are going to be important. So he kind of lays out sort of the typical definition of usury. He quotes I think Cardinal de Lugo. He also has here Martino Bonaccina, maybe, with respect to what usury is. So usury is profit forthcoming directly from a loan, and so that's kind of the initial definition. There's some additional qualifications that typically have to do. So profit forthcoming directly from a loan, such that one making a loan in excess of the principal, that is, the capital sum, might gain something that is capable of valuation of money, according as such profit is positively intended as a result of the loan. So it's a very kind of typical definition of usury, and he goes on to give kind of the typical argument why it's evil, makes the distinction between things not consumed in use and things consumed in use, clearly following Aquinas here, and that absolute ownership is transferred in things that are consumed in use, whereas in things that are not consumed in use, you can transfer the use apart from the ownership. Now, as I argue, this kind of consumed in use versus not consumed in use is typically tied to the nature of things, whereas basically anything can be consumed in use or not consumed in use. I think I've talked about this before, but for example, a house typically is not consumed in use because you use it by living in it, but there are ways in which you can consume, quote unquote, or alienate a house, such as selling it, bulldozing it, if you wanted to do that. And then things that are consumed in use have uses that don't consume them. So the typical example for money is that it's granted in display or as security. But I mean, wine, wheat, you can put those on display. And those are uses that don't consume them, but also you can rent. So, but very kind of following Aquinas here. After that, he discusses this potential objection, essentially saying, well, money is no longer sterile. And he, I think rightly argues, well, yes, money is still sterile. The profit that arises from money only arises because of the activity of men. And I think that's entirely correct. Even today we talk about money as capital, but it's only capital as productive in a very analogous and indirect sense, because the only way that money becomes productive is through purchasing productive things, through that activity of men. So, for example, you buy something, you trade it, you buy it, you sell it for more, and then you've made more money. That's not money being productive as such, because you had to buy something that was not money, you had to go do something with it, and then you had to sell it, and that was what produced the money. The money itself did not produce anything. Even investing in companies or machinery or something, the money in itself is not capital or productive. It's that which you buy money with that is productive. Or something about your behavior and the activity you do that's productive. So, and then he cites, Benedict XIV, his encyclical Vix Prevenit, to support that. Then he goes on to discuss a couple of propositions that have been condemned. The most relevant one for what follows is going to be a condemnation from Alexander VII. And so the proposition is condemned. So Alexander VII is saying this proposition is false. So the proposition is, it is lawful for one making a loan to exact something beyond the principal, if he should pledge himself not to exact repayment of the principal until a fixed time. So this will be important because Liguori will address that later. But in the next part, he kind of takes up this question, and he says, the question he asks is whether on the basis of an obligation under which the one making the loan might place himself, of not exacting repayment of the loan except after a considerable time, he may be able to exact something in excess of the principal amount, even if no disadvantage should come about for him by reason of postponement. So then he goes on to discuss three opinions. The first opinion is yes, because the considerable time is extrinsic to the loan. The second is yes, but is that the second opinion? No, the second opinion is no, because the time period is not intrinsic. And then the third opinion is yes, but it's because after a considerable length of time, there's always some other extrinsic title. So it's not from the time period in itself, but because there is something other than the period of time that gives one some sort of claim to something more. So Liguori, quite interestingly and wrongly, in my opinion, agrees with the first position, that the length, the duration, is is extrinsic to the contract. And so he distinguishes between a normal period of time and an exceptional period of time. And so he says, in a particular loan with an agreement of waiting for an exceptional time period, such an obligation is not intrinsic but wholly extrinsic, and therefore the obligation does not arise from generosity but from justice, owing to the agreement that according to justice it binds the lender to wait for so great a time period. Hence, if one making the loan takes something for such an obligation, he takes it properly, not owing to the advantage of which he is deprived, but owing to the burden imposed upon him by the agreement. The burden assuredly is capable of valuation of a money price. So this is frankly just quite bizarre position to hold, that the duration of the contract, the obligation, is actually extrinsic to the contract, because frankly, it's just manifestly false, because the duration of the contract is intrinsic to the contract. And somehow it's really unclear to me exactly why he would think that is extrinsic to the contract. And it seems like just because it is an exceptional period of time. And it's so therefore, just as something cannot be exacted from the fact that payment is expected on the basis of some time, so neither may be exacted on the basis of so much time. Otherwise, they say usury is such a form could easily be concealed, oftentimes not exacting it on the basis of the loan, but on the basis of the obligation of expecting payment. Oh, is this the... Yeah, I might have gotten some of those mixed up. But, yeah, it's unclear to me from this why Liguori thinks this is... why it is... why it's extrinsic. He just cites a few authors, and it just has to do with this, great burden placed on the lender. Now, mind you, the exceptional period of time that he's talking about would be like 3 years. It may be in, what would it be, the 18th century? 3 years was an exceptional period of time. But it's just not convincing in the least. And going back to that condemned proposition, he argues that this is not actually contrary to that condemned proposition. So once again, Alexander VII condemns, it is lawful for one making a loan to exact something beyond the principal if he should pledge himself not to exact repayment of the principal until a fixed time. And so you would think that would condemn this position, but Liguori says that we ought to interpret condemnations like this in the strictest sense possible. And so in the strictest sense possible, this does not actually condemn this position, because Liguori is making a distinction, and following other authors, of a distinction between a normal period of time and an exceptional period of time. And so the having made that distinction, the way that he's interpreting this condemnation is that the condemnation is condemning the position because it's too broad. So this proposition would accept taking more both from a loan of a normal period of time and a loan of an exceptional period of time. And so in that generality, it is false. But it is not false in the sense that Alexander VII is is positively saying that no profit can be taken merely because of merely because of a delay in time. Now, classically, like many of the doctors and things have claimed that that you can't take more from a mutuum merely because of the delay in time. But because Liguori is making the distinction between a normal and exceptional, he is not actually contradicting this condemnation. Now that strictness in his reading of that, while probably logically correct, is seems to be a little inconsistent later on. So we'll kind of skip ahead to discuss this. He goes through some other things around mental usury and when restitution is due. There's some interesting cases that he considers, just to briefly go over that. So he considers like the borrower and the lender are both in on it. So the lender is demanding something more. He's demanding usury, and the borrower is agreed to it. But then he also considers the case that the lender isn't exactly demanding more, but the borrower is still allowing or is still willing to give more. And this is all in the context of like a kind of cloaked gift. Like, it's not really usury because he's giving it as a gift, but the lender is expecting a gift. The borrower knows that the lender is expecting a gift. So in the case where the borrower is not exacting anything from the lender, or the lender is not expecting a gift, he's not demanding a gift, but the borrower is, like, he's under this kind of compulsion that, well, if he doesn't give a gift, then the lender might not lend to him later. And so in that case, the lender, once he finds out that the borrower was under such a condition, should return the gift. But let's kind of skip ahead a little bit. The next one I kind of want to talk about is the title from risk, which is in the Latin periculum sortis, which is the risk of the principal. And so, actually, do I want to skip ahead to? Yeah, I think we'll skip ahead to not the risk title, but the lucrum sessans, because that one is, I think, kind of also gives some context to the risk title and some of the inconsistency going on in the risk title. So the lucrum sessans title is essentially, it's the notion that when you're giving up the opportunity to profit, that giving up is a loss, and so the borrower ought to compensate the lender for that loss. And it really derives from this notion of this damnum emergens, or this emerging loss. And in that case, pretty much all of the theologians, including Aquinas, agree to some form of that emerging loss. And so, given that sort of compensation is due, other and later authors will argue, well, in a similar vein, that there's some sort of compensation due to this loss of profit. And other authors will also try to expand that emerging loss much more broadly than like Aquinas would have admitted to. And in fact, in ways that Aquinas, I think, explicitly rejects. But let's kind of focus on lucrum sessans here. The main way that this is kind of justified, is they look to Aquinas. Now, Aquinas, in his discussion on restitution, in the second part of the second part, question 62, I think it's Article 4, he asks whether a man would be required to restore more than he took. And Aquinas says no, because commutative justice requires a certain equality, and so if he was required to restore more than he took, then that would be an injustice. It would be an inequality. But he says that a man may lose things in two ways. First, actually, so he gives the example of a farmer in particular, and so the thief could steal the seeds of the farmer, and so the farmer possessed that actually, and so the thief has to restore those seeds. Or something that is possessed virtually. And so in this case, he's talking about, in the case of the farmer, not only the seeds, but the seeds having been planted, and that he is on the way to obtain the harvest. So he's tilled the soil, he's planted the seeds, he's watered it, he's on the way to getting the harvest. And so in that case, the thief not only causes a loss of the seeds if he digs them up and takes them, but he also causes a loss of the harvest that the farmer is on the way to obtain. So the way that several authors, many authors really, including Liguori, interpret this as is, okay, so you have the case of restitution where he possesses that profit virtually. Well, that's just the same thing as when the merchant, when a merchant lends. So when he lends, he possesses the profit virtually from his business, and so he suffers a loss of that virtual profit, and so he can demand more from that. So that's kind of the basis of the way that Liguori lays it out. Now, in question 78, Article 2, it seems that Aquinas contradicts that, because he says, but one making a loan cannot reduce to an agreement the compensation for a financial loss, which is under consideration in this objection, because he ought not to sell that which he does not yet have, and can in many ways be hindered from having. And the way that Liguori will try, along with many of these other authors that he's citing, will try to reconcile those passages to still get lucrum caesans into the mix, is that Aquinas is actually not saying, oh, well, I'm denying lucrum caesans totally, but only quantitatively. So you can't take the merchant can't take the full profit, so everything, but he can still take something for that virtual profit. And so that's the way that they kind of reconcile that. Now, very interestingly to me is Liguori actually cites Cajetan in favor of this, that Cajetan is actually supporting the taking of lucrum caesans. And the issue with that is, it's very clear to me, at least from reading his commentary, that he does not support that. And he reconciles those two passages in a very different way. So, for Cajetan, the way that he reads Aquinas is there's two things that he brings up. One is the case that in the case of restitution, it's an involuntary loss. So the the thief is stealing something from him. The farmer is not choosing to have his seeds taken away. And then the case of the creditor, it has to do with delay. I forgot to mention that. So Aquinas also considers the creditor in delay. So if the debtor fails to pay on time, then Aquinas admits that something more than just the principal can be taken as a matter of restitution from that. So he also does explicitly bring up the case of borrowing there. And so the way that Cajetan brings that up is, first, it's involuntary. So the thief steals from the farmer. The debtor delays payment, which does not give the lender his due, and so both of them suffer a loss for more than what they merely the seed or the principal. Now, the way that Cajetan reconciles that with the later passage on usury is that there's the involuntariness of it, but second, there's also the issue of the state of the money. And so he makes this distinction between money considered absolutely and money sub industria, or subject to work or industry. And so I don't like the distinctions that Cajetan makes there, because it seems like he's trying to say the money itself has more or less value, when I think there's a clearer way of interpreting it. But in any case, he makes the point that when the merchant chooses to lend, he is voluntarily reducing that money from the state of being subject to labor, so involved in the business, to being money considered absolutely to be lent. And so he's kind of giving up that profit willingly. And so when he gives the money absolutely, which does not include any virtual profit. And so in that case, Aquinas is still held here that, you don't get any lucrum caesans, you don't get any of that profit ceasing, because that virtual profit is not part of what is actually given. And he gives the example of like if you were to sell a farm. So if the farmer had not planted the seeds yet and he sold the farm, then he would receive some price for that. But if the seeds were already, the ground was tilled, the seeds were planted and watered and so forth, and he was kind of on the way, then that would be part of the consideration of the price, would be that potential harvest that he's kind of on the way to. And so there would be a higher price you would pay to buy the farm. And so he also gives the case of like a merchant lending, like if you just had the money in a box versus, you had a trade going and you were going to sell this business or this trade contract, that if you're on the way to it, you would sell it for more. And so then the loss that the thief or delayed debtor causes is more than just the money or just the seeds. Now, I wouldn't put that in terms necessarily of the money or the seed necessarily being worth more, but I would put it in terms of, I would take Aquinas's on the way to be something more broad, where it's not just the seed that's more valuable, but it's the seed combined with the tilling and the planting and the watering. So it's the thief harms that whole operation as well as taking the seeds. And so in that sense, that's how I would understand on the way, and then also Kazakhstan's subject to labor, is that it's more than that the seed is more valuable. It's that it's this this entire holistic complex of everything else that's going on. And so also with the merchant, if he has some sort of business going and, being delayed because of the mutum, and so, he's not able to send the ship out with cargo on time, or, he's not able to, expand his business or do something. That would be potentially some sort of virtual profit, because he has this business going, it's working, and because he doesn't have what is his own, he is not able to make use of it and then have this business going and generate those profits. So I think in that sense that makes more coherent sense of what's going on in Aquinas, and I think that's a better way of understanding what Kajetan is it trying to get at with subject to labor. But I think he reduces, at least from, if I'm reading his commentary correctly, at least from the way in which he seems to try to reduce it just to the money itself, which I think is wrong. So there, that I think is the better way of interpreting the lucrum caesans issue. But the interesting thing there is that for Liguori, there's some sort of ground to this. That really this claim to something more is fundamentally grounded in this virtual profit. This virtual profit which the farmer or the lender has a claim to, and so that claim gives rise to this title. So that's where I kind of want to turn back to the risk title, because the risk title is, as Anscombe just sort of passingly mentions, as a monstrosity, because here the issue is, where is this risk title coming from? And so he asks, he claims it is not usury to exact something owing to the risk of recovery, the difficulties, or the expenses that will occur or are feared in recovering the principal, because the fact that someone commits himself to such a risk and difficulty can be valuated with a money price. And he cites several authors in favor of this. And so there's a couple of things they're interesting here. First of all, the feared aspect of it is kind of interesting, because I think it's DeLugo, and that's discussed in Noonan's book. I'm starting to question really whether Noonan is accurate on almost any of this at this point. But DeLugo makes the argument that merely the fear, the sort of the pain and anxiety of that fear is a reason for taking more from this extrinsic title. Just the pain and suffering it entitles you to something more on the loan, which is just, I don't know, it's just reaching for anything to justify this title. The other thing is that risk is involved in any loan, no matter how long or short, there's always some sort of chance that the borrower is not going to repay. And so part of me kind of thinks that this is not really an extrinsic title, because DeLugo tries to relate it to that pain and suffering. So that pain and suffering is something extrinsic that justifies the title. But the way that Liguori kind of puts it is, it's like, well, just the risk of the loan itself justifies the title. But it's like there's risk always involved in loans, and always the potential for default. It's of the very nature of the contract. And so maybe just the nature of the world. And so I go back and forth about this, about whether this is really an extrinsic title, because the risk is inherent in the contract itself. But the interesting thing here is that it's because it can be valued at a money price. So you can give some sort of value to this risk, and therefore you can charge from it, which is a very, very dangerous kind of proposition, because you can give a value to all sorts of things that don't exist or are not true. Like you can give value to a talisman that you have superstitious beliefs about, but it doesn't have those powers, so it's not really valued at that. You could value it if it were true, and you can value it even though it's false. Now, to get around some of those issues, he does kind of argue that, well, it has to be an exceptional risk, which is, again, one of these things like with the exceptional long period of time. These are not categorical differences. Like you're claiming that there is some sort of title which is categorically different from the act of lending itself, and that was the case in Lucrum Caesans, as categorically there was this separate claim to the virtual profits, which was different from the act of lending itself. And here it's sort of just kind of like, well, it's an exceptionally long time, it's an exceptional risk, and from that you can derive your profit or claim, which just doesn't seem to work for me. Because it's a mere quantitative difference. It's like, at what point do I extend the period of time to the point where it becomes an exceptional period, where it's no longer an act of generosity, but it's an act of justice? And so I have a claim arising from the obligation that I've committed myself to demand more. It's not a categorical change. It's merely quantitative and continuous. So. One of the interesting things is that someone brings up the objection that, like, well, if I put my money out on the street, it's at a very high risk that it will be stolen. But if it is stolen, the thief doesn't have to pay me more because it was at a higher risk. And that kind of goes to Lucrum Caesans, where the thief has to pay you more because you have this claim that exists prior to the title. And so the issue, though, is the response to it is that the title exists because it's been reduced to agreement. So the title exists because you've agreed to it. And that's where I'm really at the point where I'm saying, well, this doesn't seem to be extrinsic to the contract, because you're telling me that you have a claim to more because you've agreed to have a claim to more. And so that becomes very, very difficult to justify. And it's because he assumes upon himself a burden of risk which is capable of valuation in money. And so again, it's this valuation of a money price that becomes the justification, rather than something like these virtual profits that he has a claim to. And so it just doesn't seem like there is a good extrinsic reason why one has a claim to this. Now, another kind of inconsistency is that when Liguori is talking about this, he tries to justify this by citing some magisterial. Oh yeah, I'll just call them magisterial. So he cites the famous definition from the Fifth Lateran Council, and as I've argued, I don't think this definition is necessarily doctrinal, because of the context, because it's not really tied to the sort of solemn anathema that follows at the end of the document and so forth. But the way that Liguori uses this, I think, is not justifiable. So the actual definition is the proper meaning of usury is when plainly from the use of a thing that does not sprout forth a profit and a yield are pursued to be acquired with no labor, no expense, or no risk. And so it seems like the way that Liguori is interpreting this is that risk here means risk presumably as broadly as possible. So risk is interpreted as risk of default, whereas before he had argued that, well, when we're interpreting these condemnations, we have to interpret them as strictly as possible. And here it seems like he's interpreting this as broadly as possible. Whereas, typically the risk that is associated with usury, and let me get a drink of water. So the way that Aquinas talks about risk is it's always indexical or indicating of ownership. So, for example, in question 78, Article 2, response to the fifth or sixth objection, he talks about, well, the borrower takes the risk on himself, and he takes the full risk of owning it because he's the owner now. And so the lender has no claim to profit. Whereas in a partnership, the partner retains ownership of the money he commits to the partnership. And so there's that, and has the risk associated with that as well. And so the risk that is usually associated with usury, at least from Thomas, is the risk of ownership. But here, it's the definition from the Lateran Council is, absolutely ambiguous. It just says risk, and so Liguori seems to be reading this as any risk whatsoever. But of course, if that's the case, then it doesn't say exceptional risk. It says just risk. So there's other issues there. It also doesn't mention anything about lucrum caesans and lost profits. It talks about expenses. Does the lost profit count as an expense? I don't know. Liguori seems to be using this in a very selective manner, and his way of applying the strictness of reading documents is also applied in a very selective manner, it seems. So it seems like there's that inconsistency there. Now, going on, he quotes from Thomas Aquinas. I don't know where this is, so I need to look it up, but I suspect it's from a spurious document that's spuriously attributed to Thomas, because I haven't seen this anywhere yet. But the third is he cites a declaration from the Sacred Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith. And in this document, it allows for, I think it was missionaries or people in China to take like 30% interest on loans because of the risk involved. And it's not based on what Liguori actually cites here. It's from a 1645 decision that was approved by Innocent X. Based on what is actually cited here by Liguori, Innocent X does not approve of saying that this is licit, only that such lenders are not to be disturbed. And as I've talked about in some of the later discussions or documents from the 19th century, this is very similar language when it's talked about granting usurers absolution, that the confessors are not to be disturbed. Now it seems here that it's talking about the lenders. So by reason of the loan, nothing must be received immediately and without qualification beyond the principal amount. But if those making the loan should receive something owing to probably imminent risk, as in the case under examination, they must not be disturbed. And then it goes on a little bit. And so it seems like it's saying the lenders must not be disturbed. But it's unclear if this is like in the context again of that they must not be disturbed in the confessional, which would kind of link it to the later decisions in the 19th century. So it's not claiming that it's licit. Elizabeth Anscombe, or not Elizabeth Anscombe. What is her name? Is her first name Elizabeth? No, it's like Gertrude, isn't it? GEM. I don't know what the GEM stands for. It just occurred to me. Okay, Anscombe. She has a lecture she gave on usury. She doesn't get it quite right, but she does kind of note that this risk title is a monstrosity, which I think she's quite right about. And she talks about this declaration and notes that this isn't a solemn declaration, and it's clearly not. And one of the things she pointed out too was that a lot of the or at least some of the missionaries in China would take 30% on loans from the Chinese people, which I would assume was massively detrimental to the missionary activity, frankly. But that's another area of research. Always kind of interested. Now, obviously, along that kind of line of reasoning, an author, Thomas Hurtado, claims that this, or Henry of St. Ignatius, claims that this is merely tolerative rather than approving of it. And again, Liguori reads this as broadly as possible, I think, and he says that lenders must not be disturbed. He just reads that the lenders must not be disturbed as a positive permission rather than merely tolerance. I don't find that particularly convincing. And Liguori's argument is It would have been strange supposing that the pontiff had commanded observance of the decree, since he would have been convinced of the fact or were in doubt that this is usury. And I think that's an interesting line of reasoning, because it really cuts to a lot of the 19th century statements and the way that those were interpreted, because allowing these usurers effectively to receive absolution even in bad faith, and that these confessors should not be disturbed in this practice. That was interpreted as, well, I mean, obviously the Holy See would not allow usury to be taken, or they wouldn't allow it if it was, in doubt. But it seems very clear that it was. I mean, even later on, there's documents from the Roman Curia. I can't remember which one it is. It's either the Propagation of the Faith or the Sacred Penitentiary. But they have a document, and I believe it's in Denzinger, I just don't have it at hand, where they say, you can take it from these titles, which list the usual titles, or just simply the legal title, but we await the final decision from the Holy See. And that's a very interesting comment, because that would admit that, well, yes, we are saying that you can take these titles, but it has not been declared by the Holy See that these are actually just and licit. In fact, they implicitly admit that they could be usurious. And so there is still this question of, like, okay, well, yeah, there might be some doubt. And potentially Innocent may have not thought it was usurious, but he didn't declare it not usurious. And so he may have in good faith made this declaration, but it's still usurious. But the main point here, though, is that, again, it seems very inconsistent of Liguori to be reading these documents as broadly as possible when he reads, for example, the condemnation of Alexander VII as strictly as possible. And I think he also cites Innocent XI's condemnation of effectively time value of money as an excuse for usury. And I think time value of money, properly understood, entails lucrum caesans. And so I would argue that the condemnation of time value of money also, as a immediate logical entailment, condemns lucrum caesans as well. So, but that's something to get into at a later time. But yeah, so it seems like there are some very serious inconsistencies in the way that that Liguori applies these principles. In the case of lucrum caesans, there's some sort of fundamental reason beforehand that gives rise to the title, but not so with risk. And risk is merely this way from the fact that they agree to it. And then there's these issues with, well, how are various documents supposed to be read, and then how strictly or broadly can they be read, and just the issue around whether these titles can truly be said to be extrinsic or not. The sort of title from the duration of the loan, it's hard to see how that's even plausibly extrinsic to the contract. And the title from risk. If the risk, if risk in itself does not justify something beyond, and that it has to be from the very fact that he takes on the burden, then that is something intrinsic to the loan, because from the very act, he takes on the risk from the very act of lending. And so it seems like from the very act of lending, he's trying to exact something more. So, so those are some of my thoughts. Liguori continues on from here at length. There's some other issues potentially. One of the ones I've read about is that Liguori ultimately defends this notion of being able to take the title of lucrum caesans even if you don't even will to engage in business. That there's still this potential that you could take the title even if you're not even a business person. And Van Roy draws this out in sort of the capitalist society, that this is a universal claim to lucrum caesans, because everyone can invest, and you don't have to have an explicit intention to invest. It's just that the opportunity exists. And from my perspective, having argued against these titles, it seems that lucrum caesans is that gateway into justifying all usury, which Cajetan actually warns about, that if you don't have this requirement for charity, and if you don't acknowledge this distinction of the lender himself removing his money from the profit, you have this point at which all usury becomes justified. And I think that's rather prophetic. So that's kind of Liguori, and at least Liguori on some of the extrinsic titles, and my thoughts on them. So yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to let me know. And if you disagree with me, let me know. I'm always really interested in various challenges, because I'm trying to construct as consistent and coherent a theory as I can, and I've always been assisted in that by being told, or at least argued with, why I'm wrong. Like someone had pointed out the Fifth Lateran Council and the manner in which, the definition is doctrinal because it's tied to the solemn anathema at the end. And I hadn't considered that before. I don't think it's true, and I don't think that argument works. But it does help me kind of think through things more. So, feel free to reach out, leave a comment, and let me know. But, this has been an extra long episode, and I appreciate you for listening. All right, thanks. Bye.